Home ownership is exciting. Let's learn how to do it right. Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Smart Money. I'm Chris Postler, joined by Brad Nelson. Brad,
Hi, how you doing?
Hey, I'm great.
Awesome. It's good to be back.
Hey, it's great to be here. We're glad to have you back. We have another great episode for you today. We're going to talk about home buying. You know, am I ready to buy a home? We're going to talk about how to prepare for that process.
Yeah.
What to be aware of while you're going through that process, how to plan for that process. But I want to start out by talking, Brad, at a high level, you know, what should be my ultimate plan? You know, I think when a lot of times when people go in to buy a home, they're thinking about how can I move into that house? Right? We're really talking about the whole process. Your plan and your goal when you're going through this process should be, how do I make the last payment on that home?
Heck yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because buying a home, we know, especially when a mortgage is involved, is over a number of years. We're going to talk about what number of years is the best number of years to be doing that over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
So we have a lot of great stuff. Without further ado, Brad, let's dive right into it.
Absolutely.
So when you're considering buying a home, what are we going to do?
Well, first and foremost, before you even consider that first home, there's going to be some things that we want to make sure that we get taken care of. First, like we talk about here in Smart Money, we want to reduce as much of our debt as possible outside of this new home purchase that we're going to have. So things like credit cards, vehicle loans, student loans, whatever debt you've got out there, let's get on a plan, get on that budget we talk about, and start figuring out how are we going to pay down some of these debts. Because these aren't going to go away when that new home comes, right? We're actually going to be setting ourselves up for more risk because we're going to have other things which we're going to talk about, right? So we want to make sure we're taking care of some of this debt and we're paying some of this debt off. Then after you get most of your debt, if not all of your debt, which is what I would prefer paid off, is the next step is really to build a good solid emergency fund. All right, now it's been said that up to 92% of people do not have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. And that's way too many people that don't have this emergency fund set up. So start building a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Now listen, this is an emergency fund. It's not a new furniture when you get that new house fund. It's not a, we're gonna, get a dishwasher. We're gonna, this is an emergency fund. It's only meant to be used for emergencies. Now, once that emergency fund is built, now we're gonna take some time and we're actually gonna start saving some money for that first down payment, all right? And we're gonna start figuring out, okay, so when you get a loan, I recommend you at least put 20% down on that home purchase, all right? Now, I love 100% down. If you can do that, all the more power to you. That's what we're shooting for. But at the minimum, I would say at least 20%. Most lenders are going to require at least a 10% down payment. Now, I focus more on the 20% because here's the thing. Life happens, and if you ever need to move or get rid of that home, if you put 20% down, you're at least not going to be selling that home at a possible loss, right? You've put enough money down where if you sell it, you're going to be able to get some money out of it, and it's not going to basically ruin your financial future, right? That's what we want to protect ourselves against. There's also some other, down payment options out there. I don't recommend some of these. The most common one out there is really the FHA mortgage. This is probably the most popular one that you hear. This is the 3% down. This is the one that the government came out with because they wanted to make home buying available to everyone, including people who couldn't afford them, all right? And I don't want to be a hypocrite here. I used FHA loans when I got my first two houses, all right? The second one, like many people know, I got foreclosed on and was luckily able to short sell that thing, but I had no business buying that house because I just didn't have the money, I didn't have the down payment, nor the patience to save that down payment. I just didn't have any business getting myself into that home.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think a lot of these FHA loans, Brad, these lenders are going to find a way to insulate their risk.
Yeah.
Right? And these FHA loans have other instruments within them for them to make their money, which guess what means? You're paying for it anyway, right? And it may be in the form of fees, something that's not even helping you build equity. Yeah. I want to back up for 1 second and focus on one thing that you talked about. I think reducing and paying off debt is right. That's great. right? That's how you prepare to buy a home. The other thing that I want to talk about, the emergency fund and this down payment fund, they're separate things.
Yes.
Right? It's not, hey, I'm going to take part of my emergency fund and fund up my down payment fund.
Yes.
They're separate. You build
Absolutely.
this one and it stays over here. Then you start to build this down payment fund.
Yep, absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Cool?
Yep, absolutely.
So the next thing that we're going to talk about is going to look for homes,
Yeah,
right? Hey,
right.
the exciting part,
Yes, right.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of a bummer for a lot of people, but don't even start looking at homes until you can figure out what you can afford. All right, this is a mistake that a lot of people make. You know, they're driving around on the weekend and they've kind of had this idea, maybe I should buy a home, and all of a sudden they see this, the sign in the yard of a nice house and they're like, hey, let's just go look at this. And before you know it, you're home happy, right? This is a home, maybe not necessarily of your dreams, but maybe it's a nice home. It's a home you want to get into, and you get that emotional charge to buy. We've talked about that many times here on Smart Money. And what tends to happen is the math portion tend to be forgotten about because behavior kicks in. And your spouse really, really likes it and they want to be a part of it. They want to buy the house, and before you know it, you're all sitting down and you're like trying to figure out how you can afford this house without even looking at your budget and what you've got. Right. So it's really, really important before you start looking at that house, let's figure out what we can afford so emotion doesn't take over.
Right. So even in this home kind of search, when you're out there looking, you're really going to take emotion out of it, right? And that really means it's not like going into a Best Buy or a supermarket or Target and you get to see everything, right?
Yeah.
And it's very easy to impulse buy.
Right.
You can actually set yourself up for success by planning, knowing what you can afford, and only looking at the homes that you can afford.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Because you don't want to set yourself up where, maybe you find that dream home. It's a little bit outside of your strike zone, and pretty quickly, that home starts to own you.
Yeah.
And that dream home turns into a nightmare home.
Yeah. That is not a fun situation.
A place where you're staying up at night thinking about how you're going to make that next payment.
Exactly.
We're going to talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. But,
yeah.
I think that's a great point to make. So, Brad, I'm going through this process. How do I start to determine what home I can afford?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, a good idea is we talk about all the time, have a budget, right? Understand what your expenses are, but then also don't allow other people to determine how much of a home you can afford. So, a common practice that you're going to have to do, and we're going to talk about pre-approvals here in just a little while, but you're going to have to go see a lender. You're going to have to figure out what you can afford to get. So they're going to start looking at things like, how much money do you make? They're going to start looking at your taxes. They're going to start looking at some of your assets. And they're going to start figuring out, okay, if we were to lend this person money, or lend this person some money, how much money would we lend them? Yeah. All right. Now understand that the number that they give you doesn't have to be the money that you borrow. Like when I was going through this process, now mind you, I was in my early to mid 20s, and the amount of money that they were approving me for was crazy ridiculous. And I still got in over my head. So if I would have accepted what they were willing to give me, it would have completely busted my budget. So understand that what they give you doesn't determine what you can afford. You determine by looking at your budget, understanding your expenses, what you can afford when it comes to your home.
And I love that point, Brad. And you know what they're not doing? They're not looking at the full picture, right?
Right.
They see some of the things that you have out there by looking at the debt that you have out or looking at your bank accounts, but they're not looking at all the other activities that you do.
Right.
Your habits, everything else that you like to do.
Absolutely.
To live the lifestyle that you're living. Right? Because they're going to quote you that super high number.
Yep.
And if you go out there and you take that loan and you start making some of those payments, guess what? You're going to run out of funds to do those other things.
Absolutely. Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
And as far as, doing that budget, this is a percentage I definitely want to recommend. We talk about this. We don't want your home, the price of your home, to be more than 25 to 30% of your take-home pay. Not off of your gross income, which is before taxes. We want to make sure it's off of the net. After we pay taxes, what we actually bring home. We don't want that to be more than 25 to 30% of that take-home pay. So this is part of having that really good budget and figuring out, okay, what does 25 to 30% look like for us? That's what we can afford to do.
Right.
Yep.
And again, on this one, Brad, we're staying away from that emergency fund.
Yes.
Right? So we're looking at our take-home income in a month's time. take 25 to 30% of that. Does that cover your mortgage and all the other monthly payments that you're going to have to make related to that home?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then there's some other things that play in there. What term loan do I get? All that. But if it doesn't, you're probably getting yourself into a mortgage that's going to be not end well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yep. And there's obviously some other things. Understand when you're looking at a mortgage, you've got principal, you've got interest, and you've got taxes, which is sometimes when you go do those mortgage calculators online, it's only figure P&I, which is principal and interest. It's not figuring in the extra real estate taxes that you're going to have to pay on that home. Some do, but some don't. So keep that in mind when you're calculating out some of these things yourself. Taxes can be a pretty big burden depending on where you live. You're going to have it's a pretty big expense. You're also going to have insurance, right? So you're going to have to insure the home. So don't forget to get quotes and figure out, okay, how much does average homeowners insurance cost in my area? Like if you're in a flood area, it's going to be a lot different for you than someone who's not in a flood area. So make sure you're doing some of this homework and you understand what those expenses are going to be. Don't also forget about things like utilities. Like, well, I'm from Wisconsin, so the water up by us is pretty inexpensive from what I've seen on other people's budgets around the country. I've seen some pretty expensive water bills, or if you're up in Canada, they call them the hydro bills, right? Yeah. But those things are going to be a part of this new budget that you're going to have. So make sure you figure those in. A big surprise for me in the municipality I was when I owned a home was the sewer charges. I didn't know I was going to have a sewer charge, and every quarter I would get like $120 or $130 extra bill that I didn't even know about. Right. And then all of a sudden I move into this house and 3 months in I get this extra bill, and I couldn't even afford an extra $10 at that point. Yeah. Now I got this extra 120 or 30.
And in some municipalities are going to charge you for, trash removal. Right?
Yeah, right.
Some places that's not included in the real estate taxes.
Yeah.
And I know specifically where I live here in Cincinnati, real estate taxes swing wildly between municipalities, yeah. Right? So just because one home is in this subdivision and another home is maybe 2 subdivisions over does not mean that you're paying the comparable real estate taxes. So, and especially when you're out there looking at that search process, yeah. Right? And you're on those realtor websites, or you're on that Trulia, be looking for that semi-annual or that annual tax amount.
Yes.
Break that down into monthly payments. I would recommend escrowing that on a monthly basis.
Absolutely.
It helps for budgeting purposes.
Yep.
So you're not just whacked with those bills, once or twice a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
right?
Escrow is very, very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next thing, when you're going out there, and I used to be in banking, and this is a great recommendation. What am I going to do before I go out and look for that house?
Yeah, and we mentioned it. You're going to go out and get pre-approval.
Yep.
All right. So again, don't go get yourself house happy before you know that you can actually get some money or get some capital from a bank to pay for that home. Yeah. So this is the pure pre-approval process. And again, what they're going to do is really go through, not really with a fine-tooth comb yet, but they're going to look at some things in detail. They're going to want to see your pay stubs, maybe some taxes from the past couple of years. They're going to want to confirm everything that you're claiming and why you can afford this home. And they're going to look through everything. Then what they're going to do is give you a pre-approval letter in most cases. And they're going to say, X buyer is qualified to buy this much of a home. And then what you can do is when you go and you start looking at homes, if you find a home that you like and it's in that budget range and it's in the amount of money that you're pre-approved for, your realtor that you're working with, or if you're doing it on your own, we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit, you can use that pre-approval letter along with the offer to purchase to let people know that, hey, I'm legit, I can afford to buy this home.
Yeah. And I think having that letter is key because it sets you up to that other real estate agent, to those sellers as a legitimate purchaser.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
We talked about this in negotiating to win, right? You want to come in a dominant position.
Yes.
In a negotiable position, a position where you can negotiate and win,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say about that pre-approval process is a lot of times it's the full application process for a loan, for a mortgage.
It very well can be, yeah.
And you know what? That can be a better opportunity for you to kind of get that more stressful stuff out of the way ahead of time, right? Because there's nothing more, frustrating and talk about emotional.
Yeah.
Going out there and saying, hey, this is the house that I want. This has got to be it. This is my dream home. This is what I want to buy. Then you get to that application process and the lenders say, no, sorry.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to go through that pre-approval process. It's going to make your life much easier.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you're right. We talked about negotiation, but we talked about, you mentioned the emotional side of things. And this home purchase is the biggest investment we're ever going to make. Yeah. And, a lot of emotion gets built in all of this. So, yes, that's very good advice.
All right. So, hey, we talked about this application process, Brad, and now we're into, all right, so what type of mortgage should I get? Now, we could spend a whole show talking about the different various types of loans.
Yeah, we could.
But why don't you go ahead and walk us through kind of your recommendations?
Yeah.
I think they're in line with what I would recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I'm going to first recommend is stay away from ARMs or adjustable rate mortgages, all right? So these are typically meant to be lower payments throughout the term of the loan, but then they balloon. So a 5-year ARM is going to essentially, you're going to pay a low monthly payment for the first 5 years and then balloon that 5th year when that loan comes to term. And guess what? You have to bring all of that money to the table now, which you either have to go out and refinance it or you have to sell the home. I mean, you got to find something that you're going to do. I don't recommend these because, number one, historically where we're at as we sit today, interest rates have been at an ultimate low. So guess what? Where they're going to go? They're only going to go up from here. So if you get yourself into one of these 5 or 7 year ARMs and then 5 and 7 years, you have to go refinance it, you're likely going to be refinancing that at a much higher rate than what you can get today. Also, the second thing, the other reason I don't like this, you can't predict the future. We have no idea what 5 years is going to be or 7 years is going to be from now. And most people, like we've talked about, don't necessarily have the capital to take advantage of some of these types of loan products. Most U.S. citizens probably should stay away from these. And there's a lot of people that don't, and they get themselves into trouble when it comes to these. So what I'm going to recommend is going towards a 15-year fixed rate mortgage. Now, most people are familiar with, obviously, the 30-year fixed. And the 30-year fixed rate means that you're going to pay the same interest rate, you're going to have the same payment for 30 years or 15 years. Now, why do I recommend the 15 over the 30? Simple. Interest. That's it. That's the main reason. And the other reason, like you said, we want to make that last payment. All right, we've gotten so used to the idea in this country that we're going to have a mortgage payment for the rest of our life, and you don't necessarily have to. Let's just buy a little bit smaller of a home that we can afford. Let's make those extra payments and pay this thing off early. And as an example, we're going to have some numbers I'm going to share with you. So on a $200,000 mortgage, let's say you took out a $200,000 mortgage at 4% interest for 30 years. Your payment would be $954 a month for those 30 years that you're going to pay that mortgage. Over the life of the loan, you're going to pay a little over $143,000 in just interest. That doesn't even include the principal that you're paying. You're paying $143,000 just to borrow that money over the 30-year period. Now, this is what most people will ignore. We talked about those loan documents and things that we get. You get a stack of papers to sign, and that schedule of those payments is in there, but most people don't want to look at those because they don't want to see that $143,000 you're going to pay. Now, let's look at the 15 years. So same exact loan, except we're going to do a 15-year mortgage. We're going to do the same amount, $200,000. And on a 15-year, because you're obviously decreasing the amount of years, you can get a lower interest rate because it's less liability for the bank that's giving you the loan or the mortgage company. We're going to get 3.25%, so we're going to save interest. But get this, in a 15-year mortgage, your payment's going to be higher, about $460 higher. It's going to be about $1,405 total per month. So you are going to pay more per month, but over a shorter period of time. But get this, you only pay about a little less than $53,000 in interest. That's a $90,000 savings for not paying an additional 15 years on that mortgage.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, Chris, but I could do a lot of cool stuff with $90,000 rather than sending it to the bank.
A lot of great things.
Yeah.
Right? One of them save, but, and I want to break this down too. People look at the two rates and you say, well, it's only 75 points or it's only 1% difference. These rates are quoted as APRs.
Yes.
And you know what that stands for? Annual percentage rate,
yes.
right?
Yep.
That annual rate is much more when you get it charged over 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
30 years of an annual rate instead of 15.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
The reason why most financial advisors or coaches advise for buying a home is to build equity.
Yes.
Right? It's not to pay interest.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So you want to be in the instrument that builds you the most equity and in which you pay the least interest.
Absolutely.
Right? But still allows you to afford that home.
Yep.
15-year fixed rate mortgage is, by all estimations, the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, and they have other ones. Obviously, you can go to a 10. I've even seen a 7. I mean, so if you can go with less, go with less. But a 15 year is what I'm going to recommend, just because, again, $90,000 for a lot of us, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for me. And I would much rather have that in my own pocket than in the bank's.
Yeah. And we're trying to do this in a linear fashion, this episode. But obviously, these calculations are something that you need to know back when you're doing the planning for this.
Absolutely.
Right? So this is that P and I part we're talking about, the principal and interest.
Principal and interest.
So that's the monthly part we're talking about. So you need to do these calculations back in that planning phase.
Exactly. Yep. Right? That's a good point. So we mentioned this payment of a 15-year mortgage on a $200,000, 15-year mortgage, $200,000 loan was around $1,400. Is that 25 to 30% of your take-home pay?
Yeah.
And then if it's not, then we know that $200,000 is way too much of a home that we need to buy. We need to back that off and find something else that's more affordable.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I hear this a lot too, Brad, and I'm going to set you up for this one. People say, I'm going to take the 30-year fixed mortgage, but I'm going to pay it like a 15. How often does that work out?
Not very often. In fact, the FDIC says that more than 95% of people don't make that extra payment. And this is that 13 payments a year rule. Like, if you just make one extra payment on your mortgage, you'll be able to pay it off in 15 years. It's a great rule. Like, if you're in a 30-year fixed rate mortgage right now and you're at a really good rate and you don't want to refi out of that, just make an extra payment. But here's the thing, you're going to be part of the 5% of people who actually do that and take a more proactive approach to paying down their mortgage quicker.
Yeah, I like that. So the next piece, what if we talk about this living debt-free.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
What if you are in a situation where you've lived debt-free, you haven't used a credit card, you haven't been a part of consumer lending, but guess what? That's a good thing, but you also don't have a credit score.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, there is an option out there. It's called manual underwriting. And basically what it means is, rather than a average loan officer relying on your FICO score and a couple of your financials to determine whether or not you're credit worthy and can you afford this loan, they're actually going to have a human person not necessarily pay attention to your credit score necessarily, but they're going to go through everything in your financial life with a fine-tooth comb, like even more thorough than the normal loan process. And in many cases, this takes twice as long as the normal loan process because they want to make sure that you're going to be able to pay that money back. Now, keep in mind, your credit score still matters. So if you have terrible credit and you go to do manual underwriting, sometimes terrible credit can be even worse than no credit at all, because terrible credit means that you've got credit history, it's not very good. Whereas opposed to no credit means that you haven't taken out any debt, so they can't really determine whether or not you're actually credit worthy or not. They're going to look at everything else. Right. It's harder to get approved for, no question about it. It's not going to be easy by any means. Like I've mentioned before, when you don't play the game, the financial game that's out there in society, things are a little bit more difficult if you want to get debt. But it is possible for people to say that you need to have a credit score to get a mortgage. That's not necessarily true. Is it going to be harder? It will be harder.
Right. So whether you're going pre-approval or you're going the normal application route or you're going to do this manual underwriting, you're going to need to supply proof of income.
Absolutely.
Right, Brad?
Yeah.
And I wanted to back up and just, remind our consultants that, you're running your own business, right? You're not receiving a paycheck or, the W-2 that a lot of people that in a JOB are.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a JOB and you've got that, but you also want to represent your other income. And you know how you're going to be doing that when you go to do this application process? Through your tax returns.
Yeah.
Right? So making sure that we're doing our taxes every year and representing the income that we're really making from our business becomes really important in this application process.
Yes.
Does it not?
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Right?
Yeah, I think John Bolger, we had him on a live meetup. I know he's been on Smart Money and he said the same thing. Yeah, your taxes are just so important. Not filing is going to be detrimental to your financial life. You've got to file your taxes.
Right.
Yep.
Good point. All right, so we've talked through a lot of great things. Now let's talk about some of these hidden costs that come with home buying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now we're talking about the dreaded thing called upkeep.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is one of the areas that many people forget about when they have those picturesque moments in that house where they're like imagining their family in it, and they forget that stuff's gonna break. Mm-hmm. Things are gonna wear out. You're gonna come home, you're gonna have a leaky pipe, you're gonna come home, you're gonna turn on the shower, your hot water's not gonna come out. plumbing issues are going to happen, the roof's going to, I mean, this stuff is going to happen. So you got to have a plan for this. So when we sit down and we start thinking about a budget for this home, we can't just look at what the home's going to cost, the insurance and the utilities that we talked about. We also got to think about the upkeep and then also any possible future upgrade or remodeling costs that are going to be part of that. Because a home is a good investment, but you got to invest into it as well to keep the value going up, right? Yeah. You want to make sure that you're going to be able to afford some of those things. Now, by all means, we're not saying you need to have thousands of extra dollars a month to be able to do these things, but even having some wiggle room of having several hundred extra dollars a month to put aside to pay for some of these home repairs is going to be critical.
And having, I think we've talked about like 1% to 2%
yes.
of the purchase price.
Yes.
Right? So if it is a $200,000 home, having that $2,000 to $4,000,
yes.
that should be your expected output. And what are some of the things we're talking about here? You touched on a couple of them. We're talking about roof.
Yep.
We're talking about HVAC. We're talking about water heaters.
Yes.
We're talking about the lawn care. We're talking about water damage if you get it. Or like in my case with my son, you're talking about when he tries to flush a bouncy ball down the toilet, right? And you got standing water in your basement playroom, right? Yep. And you got to replace the carpet. You got to replace the baseboards. You got to do all this stuff, right? And it may not be enough. And some people say, that's fine. That's what I have insurance for. Guess what? A lot of homes have pretty high deductibles, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking around somewhere between a $500 to $2,500 deductible, depending on the insurance you go with.
Yep.
You got to be mindful of that.
You do.
Insurance doesn't pay for everything.
Doesn't pay for everything.
Right?
And sometimes it's not even the big items when it comes to the homes, it's the incidentals. It's like, you get into a home and the light switch covers are dirty and kind of messy and you want to change those out. Right. Or the electrical outlets are dirty, or you want to replace a fan in a bedroom, all of those little things. We're not talking about huge amounts of money as far as just onesie twosies, but over time, those are going to cost you some money in order to start putting in your home.
Yeah. Things are going to break.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And let's talk about this. When we're going through this process, a huge part of knowing what these items are, knowing where you're going to stand on that property that you end up buying is the home inspection.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Don't skimp on that home inspection.
Super important.
Right? Some people look at like, this is just an extra expense for me. They're going to go through and have them tell you, how old is the roof on this house?
Yep.
How old is the HVAC unit? When do you think it may go out? How old is that water heater? Is the plumbing in disrepair?
Yes.
I mean, they'll look at these things. Things like foundation.
Yep.
Look at the foundation. Is it going to need a repair?
Yeah.
Is there mold anywhere in this house, right? Like these are all things that you need to think about during that inspection.
And that home inspection is really nice because you can put that right into your contingency offer. Like in your offer, this purchase is contingent on a home inspector coming in, looking at this home and us saying, yes, we still want to buy it after he's done his report. And very much like Chris said, they're going to go through and do a thorough inspection of everything. And they may not find anything major right now, but like you said, they may say, you know what? In the next 7 years, you may have to looking at this roof.
Yeah.
Or in the next 5 years, your furnace is going to be something that needs to be replaced. So these are going to be things that you can start putting on your budget list of, okay, I know we need to start saving this. Put money aside. Don't wait and let that furnace go out and then we take out the Visa and the MasterCard and we go back into debt to fix these things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So let's go into the next piece here, Brad, and we need some help in this process, right?
Yeah,
especially when it comes to the actual purchase of the home. So who are we going to ask for help?
I suggest when you're buying, you go out and you get yourself a buyer's agent. All right. And there's a couple different reasons why I'm going to ask you to work with a realtor or a buyer's agent or a buyer's specialist, they might be called. One, they know a lot more information than you do about the market, about the neighborhoods that you're looking at. They can also do research and survey. And again, we're talking about hiring a good real estate agent. Not saying that your relatives, your brother, your sister isn't a good real estate agent, but they may not be the best choice. This is, again, remember, the biggest investment you're going to make. This isn't a choice you want to make out of love, okay? This is a choice you want to make out of making sure that you get the best deal you possibly can on this home. So again, they know more information. They have better negotiation skills than you will when it comes to the real estate process, and they understand the process, right? And then lastly, they have a lot more experience in the marketplace than you do. And this is just super important. This is going to be almost like a team member on your team when you buy this home. You want to find somebody, again, that's not only going to tell you, but they're going to teach you. Okay, so when they do your offer to purchase, they're going to go over the offer to purchase. What is it? What does it look like? How does the process work? And they're going to show you how to do everything.
And I think an interesting, out of my experience, having an agent is a great thing.
Yeah.
But there are inexperienced people out there, and you need to be mindful of it.
Yeah.
I know of a couple situations where I've had people had their agent tell them that they're embarrassed to put an offer in for them.
Yeah.
Right? There should be no such thing. That's
No.
your offer. That's
Yeah.
what you're willing to pay for the house.
Right.
I mean, if your agent should be on your side.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Yep.
And they should do what you ask them to
Yeah.
do in the process.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Not only for that point, but also too, when you go look at that home, like we talked about, you're driving down on the weekend, you see that sign, you go into that house, and then maybe it's an open house, there's an agent inside there. That agent's not on your team. They're on the seller's team. Okay, so when you negotiate or when you have that agent negotiating the sale price, you're really negotiating against yourself because they really work for the seller. They don't work for you. So this is why you want to go get a buyer's agent, because the buyer's agent is going to negotiate with the selling agent. And then those two are going to go back and forth between the two parties.
And same with your loan officer, right?
Yeah, same with the yeah.
Your loan officer, although he may make it out to sound like he's on your team 100% of the time, he's on the bank's team,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And first of all, he wants to get you a loan.
Yeah.
But second of all, he wants to make it so the bank makes as much money as they possibly can.
Yep.
Right?
Yep,
So
absolutely.
you need to be mindful of that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and the other thing, obviously, when we talk about mortgage lenders and real estate, keep in mind that these people make money off of the advice that they're giving you. So one of the number one things that I'll hear, or the arguments about why you should buy a home, is I get to write off the interest that I paid all the bank or the PMI and all that stuff. And it's true, you do to some degree, but believe it or not, it's not nearly as good of a deal as most people make it out to be. And in most cases, articles that I've read, statistics that are out there, most people on average will pay or save anywhere between $400 to $600 a year on their taxes for having a mortgage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not this like earth-shattering savings that you're getting off of your taxes by owning a home. The thing, like you said, Chris, is you need to be more concerned about the interest that you're sending out, not necessarily the money you're saving in taxes.
Right. You want to be building equity, not paying interest.
Exactly.
Even though it's deductible, it's still an expense to you.
Yes.
Right? And it doesn't build your wealth in any way.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So let's hit the last piece of this, Brad, and the alternative, of course, to owning a home is renting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about renting, because I think a lot of people out there, and quite frankly, a lot of financial advisors are going to warn against renting. And I don't think we're coming from a place like that at all.
No, I don't. I actually don't think renting is a sin. I really don't.
Yeah.
It's sold as a sin, like it's the worst thing that you can do for your financial life. But as long as renting is part of a good financial plan to get you to where you want to go, I think it's okay. Like right now, we are currently renting. We have a really nice house that we got for a smoking deal on rent, and that allows us to put a ton of extra money in a savings account to pay cash for a home here in the future.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm willing to pay rent, or quote unquote throw that money away, if that's what you're gonna call it, while I build up a huge amount of savings and go after a home that I'm gonna own free and clear in the next couple of years. So as long as it's a temporary solution, I wouldn't personally recommend renting for your entire life. I don't think that's a good financial decision. But as long as it's part of a good financial plan, I think it's okay.
I completely agree. And let me add something else to that. I mean, renting is you paying for the utility of that asset, that facility,
Yep.
right? So it shouldn't be comparable to a mortgage with interest in it. Right?
Yeah.
So when people are going out there and they're looking for rental rates and they're comparing it to what they would be paying in principal and interest to purchase the home, that's not how you do it.
Yeah,
Right?
no.
But renting is a perfectly good short-term fix to get you to a place where you're working on this plan.
Yep, absolutely.
Allow you to put some money away so that you're not in a mortgage that you can't afford before you're ready to.
Yeah.
Right?
Because here's the thing, if you can't afford that rent and you lose your job, you're done. I mean, you can just not renew the lease and you can go find cheaper rent. When you have a mortgage, you're stuck. I mean, you got to figure out, you're either selling that, or if you stop paying it, they're going to come find you. And I know that because it happened to me. All right.
Yeah.
So renting is just not a sin. Don't look at it that way. And there are people legitimately, and we talked about this briefly in Roots Personal Finance, that have come to me personally. We've talked about all of the things like those hidden costs that we have. They really don't have an interest in owning a home. And they say, Brad, is this bad? Am I wrong for not wanting to ever purchase a home? I'm not interested in the repairs. I'm not interested in doing the remodel. I just don't want anything to do with it. It's not really my lifestyle. I just don't want to be bothered with any of it. And in my situation, and what I would say is, as long as you're okay with that and you understand the long-term ramifications when it comes to your financial life because of making that choice, I'm totally okay if you make that decision. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If it doesn't fit your lifestyle, there's nothing wrong with that, and you should not feel bad for ever not wanting to buy a house.
Yeah, but we do want you to buy a house.
Yeah,
we want you to do it the right way.
Absolutely.
We want you to build equity in that house. We don't want you to be underwater. We want you to take the right steps, and that's why we came up with this great episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one thing we want to point out, we mentioned, more of the watch out for these types of things. A home purchase is an awesome thing for you. It really can be for your financial life. It should be an exciting time.
Yep.
And putting these steps into place is what's going to make it even more exciting because you're protecting yourself. All right. I can guarantee you when you own a home, your problems don't go away, especially your financial problems. It is going to rain and it is going to downpour harder than you've ever had it downpour in your life. These things are going to happen. So just be prepared for them. And if you do, you're setting yourself up for success.
Great advice, Brad. Thanks for joining me again today.
Yeah.
Ladies, I hope you learned a lot, learned about home buying, how to prepare, how to plan, how to execute. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.
So I want you to get absolutely jacked up for your life. You got to get jacked up for your dreams. You got to take all that anger, all that stress, all that fear that you have when it comes to your debt, and you got to pack it into every single punch that you can throw at this thing, and you got to give it everything that you have got, because it is time to give your debt the biggest ass kicking that it has ever received.
Hello, ladies. We're here again with Brad Nelson from Balanced Sense. We wanted to come and talk to you a little bit about his class called Roots. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your class?
Absolutely. Roots of Personal Finance is really the best personal finance course that any pure romance consultant can really take. This is an 8-week program that's really going to walk you through every step of turning your finances around. We're going to cover topics like behavior, budgeting, how to save, how to eliminate your debt. That's really going to help you turn around your personal finances. And along with the online course, we are going to do weekly live meetups where you're going to get an opportunity to speak with me personally and also meet with other pure romance consultants across the United States. Not only that, but if you're not comfortable participating in live meetups, you can have an opportunity to do one-on-one coaching with me to talk about your situation personally. We have a Facebook group page where we have a ton of activity happening day in and day out, not only helping in your personal finances, but also helping your pure romance business. And that really leads me to one of really the class favorites, is how to make money with your pure romance business. So we're going to show you how to ensure that you're making money with your business by understanding how to budget, understanding how to maybe set up an emergency fund for your business, how to set goals to make sure that you are making money with your business.
And I can vouch for this, ladies. I've seen some of the reviews from people who have been in the last class, and they're amazing, right? People setting up their first emergency fund, people getting out of debt already, people taking control of their finances. And we've enlisted Brad's help to create this class. I helped you create part of the Pure Romance class, so we're really excited about it. Look forward to it coming out. Look at the website, check it out, take control of your own finances. Thank you.